Hey everyone, welcome to today's class. I hope you guys are ready. Get your guys' notes out, and we're going to be started here in just a second. Just give everybody a second to, get all of their notes ready and get ready for some game. I got a bunch for you guys. Thank you guys for joining. All right, so let me give you guys a little bit of backstory of who I am. My name is Tybo. I call myself a production specialist. So I specialize in um, production. I do audio, lighting, and video. And I've been doing audio, lighting, and video production for over 10 years now. And I got started at a really young age. I started when I was 17. Pretty much I went straight into this. Like I've never had a traditional 9 to 5 job or anything like that. So, um, yeah, pretty much I was a dropout. I dropped out in sixth grade when I was about 12. And after that, I was pretty much homeless in the streets for quite some time until I was about 15 or 16. And then I decided to go to school. And actually, at the time, I was actually going to school to become a doctor. Strange enough, I loved health at the time, and I loved learning about a bunch of stuff about health. But after about a year of college, I switched into audio engineering, and the reason why I switched into audio engineering was because I had a deep passion for um, music at the time. Me and my friends were making music, and pretty much after taking about a year of audio engineering classes and learning about music and all of that, I decided to just stick with it. And I ended up getting 2 degrees when I was about 20. And actually, I started working in audio production at 18 before I even had a degree. So I was just so passionate about, audio, learning everything about audio. And yeah, that was like the start of just my career as an audio engineer. And then after about 2 years of doing audio production, I started actually doing lighting. So when I started doing lighting, or how I got into lighting, was I was at a job one day. I was doing live sound engineering, and the person who was doing the lighting ended up not showing up. And I looked at the lighting board of, if you ever been to a concert, you see like, the people doing the lights and, all of like the flashy kind of strobes and stuff. I was like, the audio console looked very much like the audio console looked just like the lighting console. So I was like, hey, let me just get into that and learn the audio or the lighting side of things. So after I did or learned the lighting, that pretty much opened up a whole door of new opportunities for me. Just learning lighting, I was actually able to double my income. So before I was making pretty good money as an audio engineer, but learning lighting just doubled my income. And around that time, I had a bunch of friends who were dabbling in photography, videography, and kind of audio and lighting go hand in hand with video. So it's kind of crazy how, I was watching my friends and I was like, oh, I could, kind of implement this lighting skill, or when people were having trouble with their audio, I was able to help them. And pretty much I was like, oh yeah, I got to get into like, the camera side of things as well. So I started dabbling in photography, and my first investment in a camera, believe it or not, at the time I only had about $1,000 in my bank account, and I decided to spend, I think it was 850 of those dollars on a camera. And I was kind of nervous because I had saved up this money at the time. I think I was about 21, 22, and I invested that $850 in a camera, and I had $150 left. And I was like, man, I was like, what did I just do? I was kind of having like a little bit of a regret, like, dang, should I have bought this camera? And then 1 week later, one of my music clients, a person who I worked with audio, ended up saying, hey, can you shoot a music video for me? And I was like, sure. He was like, what do you charge? And I said, oh, I'll charge you $500. He was like, oh, that's pretty low. How about I give you 1,000? And I was blown away. I was like, oh my gosh. So he gave me $1,000 to shoot his music video. And funny enough, the music video is still out today. It has, I think, over like maybe 2,000 views or something like that. The song had a bunch of streams, and I literally made my money back from that investment 1 week later. So the lesson in that is don't be scared to invest in yourself. Literally, sometimes you just have to take a gamble, especially when it comes to these types of things. Like maybe you're scared to get this microphone or this new piece of light or whatever, but you never know what opportunity comes when you invest in that. So that's kind of how I got into the camera side of things. So I invested in the camera for $850 and pretty much made $1,000 and started shooting more music videos. And that's when everything cohesively came together. I was like, oh my gosh, I love the lighting side of things. I love the audio side of things. And yeah, pretty much from there, it opened up a whole opportunity of, production for me. So fast forward, it was 2020. I had a bunch of experience doing music videos, all kinds of events. I was just doing audio, lighting, video. And then I decided to make the move to Atlanta during the pandemic. All of the studios where I'm from Seattle, Washington, closed down during the pandemic. And pretty much I was like looking for a new home where I could, just kind of start a new ground in my career. And I decided to move to Atlanta. I had a cousin and my grandfather was here at the time. So I just pretty much made that jump to Atlanta. I literally bought a plane ticket, bought a little container for all of my stuff, all my equipment that you guys see. And pretty much from there, moved to Atlanta. And I had no plan on what I was really going to do, but I knew that I had the skills to really come over here and just make a difference as far as, I was like, maybe I had this backup plan. I said, maybe if all else fails, I'll find a church that needs somebody to run their audio and their lighting and their video. And that was kind of my backup plan when I got here. So I got on the plane, I came over, and believe it or not, the first gig I got when I came to Atlanta was a church gig. I ended up working at one of the mega churches. It was actually Change Church, and that was like a life-changing experience. I'm so glad I got to see, just the community and the behind the scenes of how they run their entire operation. We had thousands and thousands of people watching on their live stream, and I was running their cameras, and I got to see, their audio team, their lighting team, and it pretty much started a whole networking opportunity from that experience alone. So, um, yeah, that was kind of how I got started. And then from there, I met a bunch of people and they found out, hey, Tybo does audio, he does lighting, he does video. So I just started networking from there. And pretty much from that opportunity on, I haven't stopped. I've always got back to back clients just from meeting one person in Atlanta who referred me to another person, to another person, to another person. And I would say 90% of all the gigs that I do are actually referral based. I don't do a whole lot of outreach as far as like, hey, offering people my services. I get a lot of people coming to me, and, that's just a blessing. I know it's not always like that for everyone, but it goes to show that if you really show up and you give it your all, no matter what you're being paid, people will see that. I remember when I first moved here, I really didn't know my worth, and I was like, doing gigs for, way lower than what I charge nowadays. But the thing was, when I showed up, I gave it my all every single time. And, that's just a lesson to show like it doesn't matter what you're getting paid or if you're getting paid at all. People notice when you show up and you just give it your all. So, when you get an opportunity, you never know who's really paying attention and who's watching you. So that's just a little bit of backstory about who I am. I know that was kind of a long spiel, but we're actually going to get into some of the production profit side. Um, so I wanted to talk about the three phases of production. Obviously, you have audio, you have lighting, and you have video. I would say audio is probably my deepest passion, obviously, because I got my degree in audio engineering and music production. But inside of the scope of audio, you have so many opportunities. You literally can do music if you have a deep passion for music. If you like kind of like post production, like, when you watch a movie, I explain to a lot of people when you watch a movie, think about, any of the new movies you've seen come out in the movie theaters in the last year or so. All of those movies, when you watch somebody speak, all of those lines inside of the movie actually had to get re-recorded. So, meaning when they're on set filming the movie, there's microphones being around, but that audio inside of the camera is never being seen in the final film. Every single actor has to come back in the studio, watch the video on the screen, and redo all of their lines so that people can control the volume. And the reason why they do that is because when you are on set, you have a lot of people. You got the makeup department, you got, the lighting people, you have cars, you got things that you just can't control. So that's why they always go back and they re-record all of the dialogue. Anytime you hear a gunshot or a footstep or a car crash, all of those sound effects are added in afterwards. And if you want to learn more about that process, it's actually called ADR, automatic dialogue replacement. And it's an entire industry. It's something that we were really kind of perfecting when I was in audio school. And it was actually one of the funnest projects I did. When we were in school, they made us watch an entire movie silently. So you take one of your favorite movies, like let's say The Matrix, for instance, it's one of my favorites. Imagine watching The Matrix on mute and then having to redo all of the audio inside of the entire film. So every single line, somebody would have to sit in front of the microphone and re-say the lines. Anytime you see the rain, we'd have to add in the rain sound effects. And that was actually a final project when we were in college when it came to post production, and that was probably one of the funnest things for me as an audio person. We practice on commercials because commercials were shorter, so it'd be like 30-second Burger King commercial, and when you see the burger flip and the people eating the burger, we'd have to redo those lines. So we would be eating a sandwich and in front of a microphone and adding in all of those sound effects. So when it comes to audio, there's so many opportunities as far as the people who are recording it, mixing it, all of it, and it's not just with film. There's a whole industry of audio when it comes to music. So when I was doing a lot of concerts, I would do the mixing, and there's actually two phases to the audio side. There's the front of house, so that meaning the people who are in front of the stage, they're the ones hearing the mix that you're doing. So you're mixing all the vocals, the instruments, and the microphones. And then there's also another phase of that called monitor mixing. So for all the musicians, they have headsets or they have stage monitors, and they need to be able to hear themselves and different members of the band. And that's actually two separate jobs. Sometimes it's one person doing both, but a lot of times on bigger productions, there's two audio engineers who are working. So I've done that. And I've also done the video side of the audio. So moving on from audio, you also have lighting. So lighting was my second passion. I love lighting so much. Sometimes when I watch movies, I completely forget about the entire, premise of the movie because I'm so locked into like, oh my God, how did they get this lighting effect right here? Or you look at the colors of the LEDs that they're using and you're just like, oh man, like, and sometimes I go back and I have to like recreate some of those looks. Like, oh, how did they do that interrogation scene with the lighting here? And then they made it all warm. And, that's one aspect of lighting. The other aspect of lighting is production. When you see a stage production, you'll see those moving lights. Sometimes you'll have different types of laser effects. So, that was something that we did a lot for the churches here in Atlanta. Also concerts. So it's not just the film side, there's also the stage side of things. And believe it or not, I actually pulled up some statistics about the lighting industry. It's actually worth $7 billion. Can you believe it or not? Like as far as all of the lighting, it's a $7 billion industry. And then kind of going back, the audio side of things, It's a $40 billion industry. So when you think about like these productions, like you don't realize like it's billions of dollars being spent in these productions. And that's kind of what I just wanted to go over today is like I've been able to make a living off of all of these productions, but really it's like there's so many opportunities. And even though I went to school for a lot of these topics, you don't need to actually go to school. YouTube is a incredible resource. I would say school was a great networking opportunity for me. And obviously, I got access to a lot of the studios and a lot of equipment. But I would say you can learn so much on the internet. And then now we have AI, ChatGPT. Sometimes when I want to learn new concepts, I'll literally have ChatGPT write me up an entire curriculum. And I'm like, hey, over the next 8 weeks, I want to learn everything about, let's say microphones. And it'll actually create you an entire you know, kind of step by step guide of like, okay, week one, you're going to dive into microphone capsules and polarity and all of these things. And you can just kind of go one by one and have it go deeper, or you can go on YouTube and just watch topics on these things. And last but not least, we talked about audio, we talked about lighting. We're going to talk about video now because video is also kind of like my third love. I love video. Like I said, sometimes I watch movies, I get so caught up in the angles for, oh my God, what camera, what lenses are they using? All of those, little details. I'm telling you, sometimes I'll watch an entire movie and forget what the entire movie was about because I'm so, you know, tuned into, oh my gosh, what sound effect did they use here? What music cue did they add there? What lens? Oh, why did they switch angles like that? Or how did they get this drone shot? So the video side of things, obviously, they have movies. I haven't worked on a feature film, but I've done a lot of like smaller budget things. Video production also encapsulates kind of content creation. I have another statistic here that says 82% of internet traffic is video accounts. 82% of the internet traffic is video content, meaning that 82% of the internet is literally people needing videos, whether it's advertisement, entertainment, news. There's just so many avenues. Another statistic I have is YouTube has over 2.7 billion users. That's so many people literally tuning in to watch videos every single day. So there's never going to be a shortage of, people that need the people that have these skills in audio, lighting, and video. Um, yeah, video editors are actually among the top 10 most in-demand freelance jobs globally. Meaning, if you need a job and you want to get hired for some freelance gigs, it's best to just learn video production, whether it's, the editing side or the filming side. And we're going to actually talk a little bit more of that as we go, because there's actually three phases of production. And I wanted to talk a lot about these or these phases of production because a lot of people miss like the bigger kind of overall theme of why production is so important. So I'm going to go over that now. So there's three phases of production, and the first stage is pre-production. Pre-production is really important. Sometimes it's the planning, the scripting, the budgeting, the scheduling, the casting, location scouting. All of those things happen before you actually go into production. I make a good amount of money doing a lot of pre-production for things like podcasts or commercials because before you show up and shoot, you have to go over all of these things and you're going to get paid doing that because they always need somebody who's experienced and somebody who's detail oriented. So maybe you kind of don't like, being in front of a bunch of actors, or maybe you don't like being on set around people. Maybe you're a little on the introverted side, but you want to be involved in production. I would say the pre-production phase, you can make a full-time living just doing pre-production. Pre-production is so important for all types of productions, whether it's music videos, documentaries, news, you name it, they're gonna have some sort of pre-production. Um, Also, if you're into makeup, or wardrobes, all of those things are included in the pre-production because you need to go over, hey, what is the talent gonna wear? What kind of makeup are we doing? Is this gonna be a more moodier look, or et cetera? I'm not a makeup artist myself, but obviously you have to go over all of these things, and you don't want to just show up to a production and be like, oh, well, what are we doing here? Or what are they wearing? Like, no, pre-production is so important. So I'm just going to take a second to read any comments. If anybody has any questions, this is literally the time to just type them in the chat. As they come through, I'll just kind of read them off. I don't mind kind of going off tour. I do have some notes right in front of me, so I can kind of go off script a little bit. But yeah, just feel free to type any questions. If you're in the Zoom, feel free to unmute, or just type them in the chat, whether you're on YouTube. I got my YouTube comments also over here, so I'll be able to read them. But going back into pre-production, I do, this week actually, I had 4 clients hit me up for pre-production planning for their studios. And all I had to do was literally sit right here in front of my desk and type up a bunch of stuff, whether it's, hey, you need this lighting, or you need these cameras, or you need these tools, or whatever. And sometimes the pre-production stage, it's kind of like, it's not as like fun obviously as being on set and playing with cameras, but it's so necessary. And like sometimes I'll just be, you know in my shorts, with my shoes off, just drinking coffee, taking my time going over all the pre-production stuff. It's not like a high stress job or a gig, so that's something that I love. And then you actually have the production. So the production, I usually call it day of production. This is after the pre-production. So when you guys show up, you get scheduled, you're like, okay, this is the production. Obviously, you got a lot of roles, whether you're the sound person, so you're in charge of miking up people, making sure you get good audio. You could be the gaffer or the grip, so that means you're the person setting up the lights, you're setting up all of the little things that they need as far as that. And then you got the director, you got the DP, camera operator. There's just so many roles. One thing I wanted to talk about is the part of a movie that everyone skips is actually one of my favorite. And what it is the credits. Sometimes when I'm watching a movie, I like to watch the credits just to remind myself of how many jobs and how many people went into a movie or a documentary. Those credits will roll and roll and roll and roll and roll. And you'll be like, man, there's like, 10 people just doing the lights. There is 20 people literally just for the wardrobe. And it just shows you, like, sometimes you'll see a budget for a movie and you're like, why did it take $10 million to shoot this movie? Why did it take $20 million to shoot this other movie? It's because that's how many people had to do a job, and a lot of it is also equipment, but a lot of it is actually the labor side of things. So um another thing is, when it comes to movies, a $1 million budget movie is actually considered a low budget movie, believe it or not. So if I gave you $1 million to shoot a movie, which seems like a lot, that's actually, in the scope of things, a low budget film. And that's crazy to think about because, I've had friends who are like, bro, I could shoot a movie for like, $1,000, $2,000. And I'm like, yeah, that's crazy. That's like literally one person's pay for an entire movie. So that's the production side of things. And then last but not least, you have the post-production. So just to recap a little bit, you have the pre-production, you have the production or the day of production, and then you have post-production. Post-production is just as important as the previous two because now we went over everything, as far as, okay, what are the actors wearing, or the person on camera. We went over all the microphones, we went over what lights we need, we shot everything. Now what? That's the post-production phase. One of the one of the roles that I really like doing is actually called DIT work. And the DIT, I think it stands for Digital Imaging Technician. And what that person does is they're the ones responsible for taking all of the files, whether it's audio or video, and they're the ones who are taking them off of whatever format, if you shot on SSD or SD card or however, even film, they're the ones who are in charge of taking all of those files and getting them to the editor. So it's not just like, sometimes you think of like, oh, the person who shot it with the camera, they just take out the files and they no, that's an entire job and an entire role for somebody, and it's called a DIT. I have a friend of mine who literally is specializing in just DIT work. And it's so important, and you can make 100K a year just doing DIT work, and all you're doing is literally transferring files. So, you don't really have to be multi-talented when it comes to these things. I know I talked a lot about like, having the passion in audio, lighting, or video, but you don't need to know all three. Yes, there's going to be more opportunities if you know all three, but I always say it's better to kind of specialize in one specific thing and be the best at it than spread yourself thin. And that's something that I'll be just totally vulnerable about is I've spread myself thin, whether it's like, if I'm locked into this audio side of things, then my lighting and my video skills kind of dwindle down a little bit. Or if I'm so locked into lighting, my audio side of skills, it's hard to kind of keep all of the skills sharp when you're multifaceted and you're multi-talented. So I'll always say, just kind of buckle down into one thing if you really love it. And I would say, I would probably, if I had to choose one, I would probably go with post-production just because it's like the kind of molding and the shaping of what you guys did. So we'll talk about post production a little bit. We talked about DIT work. You have also the editing side of things, and mind you, these roles don't just apply to video. They also apply to the audio side of things. Post production doesn't really apply to lighting as much because after everything is done, you're not really needed for like any post production stuff, but definitely audio and definitely video. We talked a little bit about the ADR side of things where the actors come in and they say all of their lines. And that was really important. But you also have the video editing side of things. There's color grading, there's sound design, whether you're kind of designing some of the ambient sounds or doing the music cues. You have VFX sometimes when you're shooting on green screen or if there's like a sign in the back. Sometimes when we're shooting on locations, you'll see a coffee shop in the back. And what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll kind of not just blur it out because the easiest thing to do is just blur something out, but actually replace it with something that makes sense within, the context of the film. And then you got the titles. If anybody follows my Instagram, you can go to my Instagram is Tybo Audio, and you'll see that the stuff that I do is very VFX, titles, kind of stuff like that. I love doing anything when it comes to motion graphics. Specifically, you'll see one of my posts actually. I was watching a Netflix film, and the opening title of the movie they showed this really cool like opening credit thing, and I was like, oh my god, I gotta recreate that. And I literally went to my computer and I recreated it and I posted it on my story, and my friend was like, hey bro, you should post that on your Instagram, I swear it'll go viral. And I was like, no it won't, nobody cares about that. Posted it the next day, literally had like 1,000 likes within like a couple hours, and then I think it's at maybe over 100,000 views. But I was like, I kind of forget how people are so fascinated with all of these things that go into production. So we talked about post production. um, some of the tools I use, just to kind of go into the post production side of things. I edit on DaVinci Resolve. I used to be a Premiere person. Um, Premiere and Adobe, they're charging an arm and leg, literally an arm and leg. So I would say I use Photoshop and Illustrator a lot. So those are two things that it's hard for me to live without. But there's tons of options. Like if you're wanting to get into post production, like I said, the freelance industry for video is booming. It's blowing up. So if you want to get into this, obviously, one of our previous instructors in content school was saying, she loves CapCut. I personally have never used CapCut or InShot, but I know people who are making, full-time living using CapCut and InShot. And, I have clients all the time who are like, bro, I wish I could learn your fancy programs. I'm like, your content looks incredible. Stick with what you're using. So, and then for the audio side of things, I use Pro Tools. I'm Pro Tools kind of certified, or that's what we got our degree in when we were in college. We specialize in Pro Tools, but another alternative to Pro Tools, because they also charge monthly subscription, is Logic Pro. So if you wanted to get into the music side of things or just recording audio and mixing audio, I would say Pro Tools, Logic Pro, Ableton, and Fruity Loops also. I know it's not called Fruity Loops; it's called FL Studio. They actually got sued by Kellogg, funny enough. So we have to call it FL Studio, but back in the day it was called Fruity Loops. So those are some of the tools for that. And yeah, just kind of going back over the pre-production. We talked about pre-production, the day of production, and then the post-production. There's just so many different skills as far as those roles. So kind of going into um, my side of things as far as how I'm been able to make all of my income. Like I said, I've never worked a 9 to 5 job or like a typical 9 to 5 job. I've worked 9 to 5, but I've never actually worked like a 9 to 5 outside of production. So ever since I was about 18, I just started freelancing. I was hired at one studio in Seattle that it was almost consistent. It was more like, like 2 or 3 days a week, I'd come in and they'd have stuff, and then it would kind of go into off season. But outside of that, I was also picking up a lot of gigs when it came to um, different events, corporate. I was working with a lot of artists. I was working with a couple influencers and then a couple of different agencies. So if you're wanting to get into something that's more consistent when it comes to income, I would definitely say look for some company that's doing corporate events. Corporate has always been the kind of not the easiest because sometimes it's stressful, but it's the most like consistent. When I was living in Seattle, Washington, um, I was doing a lot of corporate stuff, which I liked the pay from the corporate side, but I didn't really like how it wasn't as artistic. So if you're somebody who kind of likes more like rigid structure, then definitely kind of like go more on the corporate side of things. If you're more of a creative person, I would say work with artists. Artists and influencers have been, two kind of groups of people that I've been working with. Um, a lot recently. I like working with artists because they're more like the visionary and you're more of like the executor. Like you're just executing their vision. And that's been something that I've been really good at as far as like, hey, this person has this vision for either this music video or this, concept that they have. And you're like, oh, I know exactly what, audio we need. I know what kind of lighting we need. I know what kind of video cameras, and you just help them facilitate that vision. That's something that I really like. And then if you look at my bio on Instagram, it says studios, podcasts, and events. So I do a lot of events when it comes to like sometimes I'll do masterminds. I just got out of a mastermind yesterday. So, um, in Atlanta, we're constantly kind of having these inner circle meetings, and they always need somebody to either run their microphones or, do their video production. And that's been a really good income for me because a lot of these masterminds, they're high ticket. A lot of people are paying multiple thousands of dollars to get in these rooms and soak up game. So it's easy to kind of charge a higher ticket price for those opportunities because they understand the value. Some of these people will make, well over 5 or 6 figures from these inner meetings and these masterminds. So it's a good way to kind of like get your foot in the door, also soak up game, and also, collect, a paycheck that isn't just, a little bit of money. Like, so that's a good way to kind of get your foot in the door as far as um, those types of events. Obviously you have concerts. So if you're a music person, I never really liked doing a lot of concert because I always valued my ears. A lot of events that I used to do when I was younger, they damaged my hearing. And, a lot of my instructors in college would tell us, like, hey, you got to wear earplugs, you got to protect your ears. And I didn't really understand that until, I was about 22, 23, and I like was doing a lot of those types of events at clubs. And I would go home and it would take me an hour and a half to decompress just because my ears were still ringing throughout the night. Like I would try to go lay down and my ears were, I would still hear like the ringing through my ears. And that after a while kind of got so old to me. So, you got the clubs, you got events like that where it's, music events. And a little bit kind of pivoting. I also do podcast setups, as you've seen in my bio. So podcasts have been a really, really lucrative field for me. When I first got to Atlanta, I actually didn't shoot a lot of podcasts. I remember in college, my college professor, he was like, "Hey, I want to get into podcasting a little bit because, we were listening to, I think either like Joe Rogan or somebody else who had a podcast years ago before podcasting really got popular. This must have been 2016, maybe 2017. And um, I was like, yeah, let's do a podcast. He was like, yeah, I want to interview you. And the funny thing is, I still have this podcast clip today. He wanted to do just audio, and I told him, I was like, "Hey, I just bought a camera. Let me just, record it. I'll let you do the audio. I'll do the video." And we came together and we did a podcast. And in that podcast, I remember telling him, he was like, "Where do you see yourself in the future?" And I told him, I was like, "I kind of want to move to Atlanta." And he was like, "Oh, I've lived in Atlanta. I used to do audio work. I went to a school out there for audio." And he was like, "So if you move to Atlanta, what would you do?" And I was like, if I move to Atlanta, I just want to be involved in tech. I just want to do like, all the stuff that I'm doing here, but I want to do it just like, just you really utilizing all of my skills. And I said this, I want to say in 2017 or 2018, before I even moved here. I ended up moving here 3 or 4 years later. And I still have this podcast clip. I'm going to post it one day and kind of just, show the manifestation. So I just want to remind you guys, like, if you guys have a vision of where you guys want to be, literally put it into the universe. Like, record yourself on a camera. Maybe you don't post it, but, record yourself talking about, hey, I'm going to make my first $100,000 doing this, or I'm going to, I'm going to work with this person. I remember there was these people in Atlanta that I was like, oh man, I wish I had the opportunity to work with them. Fast forward a couple of years later, I'm literally working with these people, and influencers over 1 million subscribers, or 1 million followers. I've worked with actors, I've worked with musicians, I've worked with a lot of people. When I used to live in Seattle, I'd be like, man, it seemed like so far, and it felt like a bigger goal than who I was over there. But moving over here, I realized how close all these opportunities actually are. So don't be scared to put it in the universe and record yourself so that you have proof. And I like to say, with these microphones, they're picking up energy. When I'm talking into this microphone now, it's not just listening to my sound levels. It's actually converting it into an electrical signal. That electrical signal goes into my interface. My interface is converting that into ones and zeros. And it's just amplifying everything that we're talking about and we're living and we're kind of experiencing. So, don't underlook the value in kind of like recording yourself talking about the opportunities that you want to do. Um, so, we were talking about podcasts. Podcasts have been um, a really good opportunity for me because with podcast, you get to utilize all of the different skills that I talked about. You get to talk about you get to utilize the audio, you get to utilize the lighting, and you get to utilize the video side of things. And I have shot over 300 podcast episodes in the last 2 to 3 years. I've shot over 20 different types of podcasts, podcasts ranging from business. I've shot podcasts about um, home births. I've shot podcasts about all kinds of different ranging subjects. But the reason why podcasts are so important nowadays is I have a statistic here that says um, there's 5 million podcasts, over 5 million podcasts, and 70 million episodes. Podcasts literally, they're everyone is trying to start a podcast because you can get your friends together, you can talk about any subject, whether it's gaming or sports or whatever is your passion. You can literally get some microphones like these, sit down, talk about these subjects, and people who are like-minded or in that industry or like whatever that style of content is, they'll tune in and listen. Like back in the day, I used to just listen to podcasts while I work. I used to, go to the gym. I'd listen to a podcast. People are listening to podcasts because sometimes with podcasts, it feels like a conversation between people and you're inside of that conversation. And that's why, sometimes with music, it's cool to listen to music, but like with podcast, you're literally kind of like tuning in and getting to hear what people are talking about. So, podcasts are a really great way to kind of utilize all of those different skills. And then, obviously, when I was talking about the pre production, when you're talking about a podcast, it's really important to kind of do the pre production stage. I've shot some podcasts where we didn't really go through the pre production. We showed up and it kind of just turned into a mess because we didn't go over all of the talking points. We didn't really go over like who is the target audience. So just kind of tying back into that, when you do plan to shoot a podcast, make sure you're taking each step very seriously as far as the pre-production, making sure, sometimes you have to ask, hey, what are you guys going to be wearing during the podcast? What are you guys going to be talking about during the podcast? And maybe if it's a subject that you guys don't know about, maybe you pop that subject into chat gbt and you kind of get some mock-up talking points like tomorrow I'm shooting a real estate podcast or going to be helping with a real estate podcast and I don't know very much about real estate, but I can go into chat gpt or use some ai tools and kind of get some talking points about you know what can I ask them or what can we go over. And sometimes the hosts for the podcast already have all those things in line, so you don't really need to do as much of that kind of like the subject matter in the podcast, but you still want to go over the things that we talked about as far as the audio, making sure that they have the right equipment, the lighting, the video camera. And then when you shoot the podcast, make sure that you get backups of everything. I like to always say if you're only recording in one place, you're pretty much going to be screwed. Like I always make sure if I'm recording something, it's recording in two separate places. So when I record my audio, I'm not only recording in one device, I'm recording in a separate device. So let's say this device goes out or loses power or something happens to the memory card or the SD card or whatever, you always have um, that backup recording. I've done productions where, it's, something happens with the memory or something happens with the microphone, and you don't want to be in a situation where you're getting paid a lot of money and a simple mistake like that happens. So, that's always just a safe way to kind of ensure that none of your files get corrupted and you don't lose anything because, it's really important to capture all of these files and make sure that they work correctly later. So, just to kind of go over everything, I know we talked about, audio, lighting, video, the pre-production stage, the actual day of production, the production itself, and then the post-production. So I might take some time to answer any questions. If anybody has any questions for me, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm reading them now. Um, let's see. One person asked me, what is my favorite microphone to use? One of my favorite microphones to use is actually the SM7B, this one right here. And kind of going into why this microphone is my favorite, I know you guys can't see it super clearly, and it's also rotated, but these microphones actually have this plate on the back where you can put a design. And what I've been able to do is any podcast opportunity that I get, I make sure that I upsell them a little bit on these extra brandings. So if you watch, the first person I ever made one of these fours was Hardly Initiated. When I was working at their studio, I helped do their lighting. I helped kind of consult on their audio and their video recording process. And I kind of upsold them on these back plates for these microphones to help them kind of have branding. And why these are super important is they used to get their episodes chopped up. So people would literally download their episodes on YouTube, repost them, and not tag them. And so it was kind of like, like, dang, like somebody stole our content and there's no way for people to know that that was our content. So that's when I started to tell them, I was like, hey, I can make you these mic flags or these, not flags, but the plates that go on the back. And so pretty much I 3D printed them. I'm a man of many talents, so I actually have a 3D printer in the next room. So I 3D printed them a plate for the back of their microphone. So if you ever watch their episodes, you'll see on the back of their microphones, they have an HI standing for Hardly Initiated. So anytime anyone chops up their episodes and posts them on another platform, they have their logo inside of that clip. So people can always be like, oh, HI, oh, that's their episode. So it helps with branding and recognition. I've made these plates for a majority of my clients, actually. I made one for Social Proof Podcast. So whenever you see Social Proof Podcast, you'll see that plate on the back. I've made them for another buddy of mine named Darius. He has an impact to influence. So he has two eyes on the back of his. And that's just been a great way to kind of upsell people on those kind of the branding to help people kind of recognize. And I don't charge an arm and leg for them, but it's a decent amount. I think I sell them for like 30 or 40 bucks a piece, or if you get multiple of them, um, you can get a deal. But it's just another way to kind of add on more value and then also get compensated for them. And then also talking about upsells, logos. So, like I said, if you guys check out my Instagram, one of my pinned posts is a logo animation reel. So, anytime one of my clients has a logo, I always tell them, hey, you need to get that logo animated. And the reason why I emphasize that so much is not only because I offer that service and I get paid for it, but we're living in a day and age where people's attention spans are getting so short that if you just show a logo, it's like it's not like captivating. So when you actually animate a logo, you'll see the things moving in or it swirl around or twist or whatever. It's just adding another layer of professionalism. And it's also adding a layer of just like, like you're just special, you're standing out. So that's something that I love to kind of upsell to all my clients. I'm like, hey, let me see your logo. Sometimes the logos are harder than the others, so the price ranges. But if it's a simple logo, then you can animate that. So you always just have to find ways to kind of figure out how can I add more value to what you already have. And that's been a great way for me to just kind of make additional income from people that I'm already working with. And it doesn't feel, like, you don't feel bad offering these services, or like you're kind of you're just, making up things to get more money. It's like, no, I think you legitimately could benefit from this. So, um, let's go ahead and take another question if somebody has one. What I did want to talk about, somebody actually asked me this on Instagram, was how I got into studio building. So if you look at my Instagram, you'll see me doing studio builds. And I didn't just start building studios recently. I've been building studios since I was literally 18. So one of the places that I lived in Seattle, I had this shed in the backyard, and me and my friend were like, "Oh, we got to build a studio," And funny enough, we went into the shed and there was like it was leaking, like a super leaky roof. So we ended up ripping the roof off. I had to learn how to, put a roof down, how to, lay the shingles and everything. And I built that entire studio, literally like installed the outlets and everything, and designed, the colors and everything. So I've been building studios for a long time, and that's been something that I just love doing. When I moved to Atlanta, I was like, going to these different studios, and I would literally be like, oh my God, we can make this better by doing this. We can make this better by doing that. And that's been a great way for me to kind of um, just get my foot in the door. Like maybe I just showed up to the studio to record something, and then they find out that I do this studio building. And then, it's another service that I can offer. So kind of the sentiment behind that is, if you have additional skills, whether it's like, oh, I also do, wardrobe, or I also do makeup, or whatever things that you do in addition to your initial service you're getting hired for, always make sure people know about those services, because you never know what people are looking for. Like, when I went to change church, like I literally was just doing video, and then they found out that, hey, oh, he does lighting. Oh, boom, here's a lighting opportunity. So just make sure you're always kind of offering any additional services that you had. Like I said, with the 3D printing, that's been a great opportunity. I make jewelry also, like, so like this jewelry that you see, I've been able to, kind of offer that to a few people. I made a hardly initiated logo chain. And people always love jewelry, so I made a ring for one of my clients. So it doesn't even have to be literally in production. You can offer your services outside of what else you do. Like maybe you, make some sort of arts or craft like I do, and you just offer those. So just kind of make sure that you're utilizing your entire network. One saying that I love is, your network is your net worth. And I truly believe that, like, once you kind of network and people know you for something, the minute that comes up, maybe you don't ask me for it for a year, but then let's say a year later, you're like, oh, I need somebody who 3D prints. Oh, boom, Tybo, he 3D prints. Or, I bought a laser engraver last year, and somebody was like, "Hey, I remember you did laser engraving," and I was able to make this laser engraved thing that they needed, and I charged them $100. It took me 5 minutes to laser engrave it. So I'm always kind of just thinking about ways that I can invest in myself, but also kind of offer more services. So don't be scared to invest in yourself. Your network is truly your net worth. And yeah, if anybody has any other questions, I know we only got about 5 more minutes. So feel free to drop any questions that you guys have. Um, Somebody asked, who is your favorite person to work with? Um, Funny enough, I've shot a lot of podcasts downtown Atlanta in the radio building, so I've got to meet a lot of just interesting people that I've watched over the years. But one of my favorites was actually Chris Tucker. Chris Tucker was on one of the podcasts we shot, and like I literally took a picture of behind the scenes and I sent it to my mom, and I was like, man, I'm like, it's crazy. Like, I've watched all of the Rush Hour movies, and then now I'm getting to, sit in the same room and record a podcast with him. Um, So yeah, no, that was a really great one. Um, Mr. Brown from the Tyler Perry show. I got to work with him and his wife. That was a pretty interesting one. Um, yeah, I mean, so many people, honestly, it's hard for me to remember them all off the top of my head. But yeah, I would say Chris Tucker definitely was one of the ones I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in the same room as, Chris Tucker, and growing up watching him. I've been watching his movies since I was a kid. So let's see if we got another question. Anybody drop them below? I know, oh yeah, we're running out of time. So, um, oh, somebody asked if I travel for work. And this year has actually been one of my biggest years as far as getting gigs outside of Atlanta. I remember working in Seattle and I was like, man, I want to move to Atlanta. And then working in Atlanta for a couple of years, I want to go to New York and I want to work there for a little bit. And then I want to go to LA and work for a little bit. And then after I moved to Atlanta, I was like, actually, I love Atlanta. Like, I'm actually going to stay here. I'm not going to move to anywhere else. And funny enough, I think about 2 years in, I ended up getting booked to go to another state. I think it was first DC. I went to DC and I got to experience Washington, DC. That was amazing. I got paid a really good price for that. So that was like my first time. Like they covered all of the expenses, rental car, plane ticket, hotel, and I got to work and be around some incredible professionals. And then after that, I ended up going to New York, and just doing all production, whether it was, we did a commercial in New York, we did a big event in DC, and then most of recently, I've been traveling around doing studio installs. So over the last year, I went to Nashville, I went to Philadelphia, I went to LA, I went to Louisiana. I'm actually going to Greenville, and then my first out of the, I don't know if it's out of the country, but this one is in Puerto Rico. So I have a client. We're actually going through the process. I did a pre-production meeting with him, and I sent him a bunch of equipment to order for his studio in Puerto Rico, and we haven't planned the date officially, so I don't want to, curse it, but he's definitely on board. He purchased all the equipment I sent him, and we're gonna actually plan a date sometime this week. So I'll be going to Puerto Rico and installing an entire studio there, and yeah, I'm really excited for that. So that's kind of bit of about traveling for work. Yeah, next stop maybe Europe, Africa, Asia, kind of go worldwide with the studio and the production. So I think that's about it. Uh, I yeah, kind of running out of time here, but if you guys want to connect with me, if you guys want to learn anything about like the production side of things, whether it's audio, lighting, video, just go ahead and shoot me a DM on Instagram. My Instagram's on screen, Tybo Audio, TYBOAUDIO, and we can connect from there. I'd love to just answer questions. I literally talk about all of this stuff all day, whether it's troubleshooting issues that you guys have or just kind of, wanting to make more consistent income or anything with production. I literally will nerd out for hours. So thank you guys for attending this class. Hopefully I get to teach another one soon. And, you guys have a great night. I'll see you guys later.